Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, you guys, for joining us for our lunch and learn about the new Google update. I am Todd Anthony. I am the founder and head of strategy for Pinwheel. So the recent Google algorithm came out, March 2024, focuses on enhancing search quality by reducing low quality and unoriginal content by 40%, which is pretty cool, I think. It's all about giving the user what they want. So we're excited to talk about it today. We have Sarah Archambault and Emily Dougherty, and these two are going to help you navigate your way through it. So I'll hand it over to Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces from our last Lunch and Learn in the webinar before that. So we love the recent Google update, as we put in the meeting invite, but oh boy, it was a doozy. What Emily and I are going to walk you through today is what Google's been up to, why it matters for content, where this may fit in the bigger context of websites in general as these updates and things continue to transition and roll out. And we wanted to keep this conversational. We're going to share quite a bit of information today. And we know this has been confusing for pretty much everyone in the industry, whether you're in the trenches directly working with SEO content, or you're on the periphery of this. What's happening with Google is going to be affecting all aspects of your website. It's starting with content right now, and down the road, it's going to start affecting other areas such as product pages, case studies, things like that. At the end of the day, what we're seeing and hearing is that it's going to affect traffic. So in this Lunch and Learn, our goal is to provide some clarity around how you can adapt to some of these updates initially, and then some key takeaways for those that are here and want to learn about what's happening sort of from a distance at this moment in time. Because this is such a new topic, we are all learning on the fly, not just Emily and I, but the SEO community in general. And there's updates about the updates happening every few days. So right now, what we've gathered here together is the latest and greatest that we're aware of, that we thought would be helpful, whether you're a content person, an SEO person, or a marketing person that's trying to get your arms around this. Stop us anytime with questions. This is an open discussion. Don't be shy. And then at the end, we are going to leave a little bit of time for an actual Q&A if you want to have save your questions for the discussion later. So let's get started. So this slide, and I actually learned something when Emily was putting this together. Google has done a lot of updates, and some of them have some crazy names like Pigeon and Panda. For those that don't know, and this is something I learned a little bit more about in this process, was that Google makes small updates to its algorithm 500 to 600 times a year, always doing things behind the scene. Once or twice a year, Google will release one or two large updates, which are called core algorithm updates. And that's mostly what we'll be talking about today. Most of the other updates that happen throughout the year are small and don't significantly change the SEO landscape. But some updates are significant, like this one, and can change the way we approach SEO strategy. Some of the other bigger updates in the past have included the addition of Eat or a mobile experience. if you take a closer look at the timeline, we'll send this out after the call. You can see some of the other milestones that have occurred over the last 12 or so years. This update is one of Google's biggest ever. It was the launch of what's called the Helpful Content Update. No fun name, sadly, shortened to HCU. And part of that, and that's under the umbrella of the March 2024 core update, which you've probably all been hearing so much about in newsletters or on LinkedIn or just conversations in your circle. All of the updates on this timeline from 2011 to 2023 have culminated in this big, massive update. So this is a really big thing that's happening right now. And I am going to let Emily explain a little bit more.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. So as an SEO, especially today, this is very much the energy that is being brought in all of the Slack communities I'm part of, the forums. So I'm going to try my very best not to adopt Charlie's vibe in this meme, but definitely still exciting to talk about some of the most recent algorithm updates. Oops. All right. So as Sarah mentioned, the most impactful Google updates that we've seen really since 2012, it was felt in all verticals. Many sites lost more than half of their traffic. So from big brands like NerdWallets, which was a recorded loser, as they say in the industry, of the most recent algo update, to niche bloggers, really no one was immune. So taking a step back, these core updates are kind of this black box of information. So really, at their core, no pun intended, core updates are designed to improve the search experience for users by providing relevant, useful, and trustworthy content. So these core updates, they don't necessarily target specific pages or websites, but instead they seek to improve how Google systems assess helpful content overall. And this is one of my favorite kind of analogies for this. Hopefully it'll help better kind of contextualize it. So think about, maybe you published a list of 100 movies in 2020. A few years later, you want to refresh the list. That list is obviously naturally going to change. The 100 top movies are Google rankings in this analogy, by the way. Some new and wonderful movies that never existed are going to be new candidates for inclusion. You might also reassess some of the films that were already on your list and decide that they might deserve a higher spot than before. So the list will naturally change over time. This means that films, previously higher on the list that move down aren't necessarily bad. It's just that they're simply new movies or content in this analogy that deserves a higher spot. So Google does come out and say that when these core algorithms, when they roll out, if you are impacted by them, it's not necessarily that there are a list of things that you need to fix on your website. It's more about taking a step back and looking at your site holistically and trying to understand how you can optimize it in a way that provides more helpful content to users. So with this specific March algorithm update, there was a lot of change to search quality. So I know Todd in the very beginning mentioned that one of the key systems in this algorithm update is actually the helpful content update. I know it sounds confusing, but that helpful content update system is now part of Google's core. So what this seeks to do is it implements refined ranking algorithms. It surfaces more useful information while diminishing original content. And then again, with this most recent 40% expected, they actually ended up with 45% of low quality content was reduced. And this did include completely de-indexing entire websites, which is probably, I think, the first time Google's ever done that without issuing a manual penalty. And then we also saw some big changes to their spam policies. So strengthened measures against scaled content abuse. So this could include using tools like AI to generate a ton of content. This is typically really thin. It's just regurgitation of content that already exists, and it doesn't actually provide any value to the user. stricter actions against site reputation abuse, where low quality content tends to ride on the coattails of more trusted sites. And then new measures targeting expired domain abuse. That gets into a bit more of the technical realm, but suffice it to say, people are essentially kind of purchasing expired domains with the purpose of using any signals that that old domain had accrued to better their own SEO. So with that, Sarah is going to talk a little bit more about the helpful content update to give a bit more context to that, because that really is what we're seeing driving a lot of the changes in the current SERP.
Yeah,
Search
and
results page.
thank you, Emily. And since we could go on and on and on about some of the things that happen with spam and other pieces of the update, we are always here to answer any questions that you may have after this Lunch and Learn too, if you want to take a deeper dive into de-indexing or anything else that was happening. So as it relates to the helpful content update, for those of you who aren't familiar with John Mueller, John works for Google, but he is also a search advocate who's super active in all these, I wouldn't call them underground SEO communities, but for those that don't know, there are lots of different Slack channels, forums, chats, all kinds of things happening where SEO folks from around the globe gather together and talk about things that are happening. And within that community, you have the likes of John, who is a senior person at Google who actively jumps in and joins the conversation. So John is also on X, and I don't know what the word is. He didn't tweet this, but this is something he posted recently to give a little bit more context about what helpful content actually means. So in John's own words, making a site more helpful, assuming that's what you're aiming for, doesn't mean you have to add more content. There's a lot that goes into making a helpful site. Content is one part, and more content is not necessarily more helpful. So as we lean into the helpful content update, it's really been really interesting to see how this is living and breathing inside Google. This core algo update didn't just shake up rankings, it's also directly impacting how the SERPs, or search engine results page, is now displaying information. And on this video here, you can see a quick screen recording. It's got the new AI overview at the top, which appears for some queries, but not others. It's still very much experimental, and you'll see it sometimes, but not always. You'll see familiar things like people also ask, people also search for, but you're going to start to see in search results, both on mobile and desktop, video carousels, something called the top stories grid. Emily, you can even maybe play that one more time.
Yeah.
You'll see lots of infographics and different visuals pulling through. In the AI piece, it is pulling in links to actual articles where it's getting the content. And then as we scroll down, this is you can see the little slider there. You've got your good old rusty trusty people also ask. Videos is familiar. Some of this is what we've seen before, but this is new, short videos. Images is similar to how it was presented before, but it's set up a little bit differently. Good old blue links, and on and on. So this environment is happening now live in real time, but it's changing by the minute and by the search query. So with that, we wanted to talk a little bit about what this means, and Emily's going to walk you through what the new SERP looks like and where there are some opportunities.
Whoop, let's not play that a third time. Okay, sorry. Oh, the kinks of presenting. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So one big takeaway that you may or may not have noticed from that screen recording that we did was that, if you're really just looking for a a definition of, what is a credit utilization or what is credit utilization, there's really no need to click. So this is what we consider a zero-click SERP. So how did we get to this no-click SERP? First and foremost, it's important to remember that Google wants the search engine results page to be a destination. They don't necessarily want it to be a vehicle to a destination. Exhibit A is in that screen recording that we just provided. Now, what this does mean, is that, of course, there's less need to click to get certain information, but there's a ton more opportunity to actually appear on search results. So when we think about the zero-click SERP, first and foremost, we can't really complain about it. It is here to stay. And if we can't control something like this, we like to work around it, right? We have to work with it. We have to adapt. SEO is constantly changing, so that's really no surprise within this industry. So in order to kind of create the zero-click SERP experience, Google introduced some fairly simple user experience changes to their search results to keep users on their website. So they first did a ton of visuals, images, product images, location images, videos, more types of media and formatting, so visual stories, questions, different types of carousels, whether it's video carousels, image carousels, and other types of widgets. There are a ton of opportunities to click. If you saw in the previous video, 50 plus opportunities to click, and with infinite scroll, the possibilities are really kind of limitless with that. And then, of course, longer pages. So with the introduction of infinite scroll, the SERP has just become completely endless. All right, so before we move on, I know we said we would stop. Are there any questions before we dig a little bit deeper?
I'll go ahead and ask one real quick. Emily, you and I were talking, I think yesterday, could have been 2 days ago, about the connection between these algorithms updates, particularly this algorithm update, and Google's core mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it accessible to people. Do you feel like there's still a strong connection between that mission and the algorithm updates, this one in particular?
Yes and no, or it depends, which is the classic SEO answer. They're not so much organizing the information now, they're more regurgitating the information that's been made available by publishers and by websites. So do I think it provides a good user experience? For right now, yes. But in the future, I do foresee there being a lot more issues as far as how to track any success as far as AI overviews go, and then any type of attribution with analytics tools is going to be really tough. So I do think that their mission is, of course, to provide the best user experience by organizing this information, but it's not ready yet. It's just not there.
Quick follow-up question for you. Have you had companies ask you to basically assess and analyze the impact to their websites of this current update?
So yes and no. A lot of the time what is focused on solely is rankings, and in this new SERP environment, rankings are kind of more or less a vanity metric at this point. At the end of the day, rankings aren't what's going to drive the success of your SEO program. It's the click-through rate. So a lot of the times what clients are asking me to look at are the trends with their click-through rates. So even though they may have lost ranking for something, right, is one of their images ranking better in image search results, or is one of their videos now ranking alongside a blog post that they may have produced. So it gets a little nitty-gritty on that front, but really what I've been tasked most recently with is trying to gauge success, not just of content based on how it ranks, but content based on the quality of traffic that it sends.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's all about the eyeballs.
Oh yeah, all about the eyeballs and qualified eyeballs.
Sure.
All right. So all right, so Sarah's gonna walk us through kind of this helpful content in action, so you guys can get a better sense of what this actually looks like on paper, so to speak.
Yeah. So what we're seeing out there is obviously this is brand new. We know some of you in the room here are already doing certain things to start to amplify what's on your content pages, like videos and more images. And we're loving seeing that, and that's all great. Those are all great ways to start to adapt to what Google is going to start to is starting to want to look for to help pull your content onto that search homepage, so to speak, that is now the new environment. So when we really think about how helpful content in action looks, it's original, it's unique, it's got visuals, it's well organized, and it's user first. In a nutshell, Google basically wants us to create content for people and not to rank in search engines. And the way this is happening, and in Insurify, we pulled this example. They do a lot of testing, and if you go on their site, you'll see I happen to write for them freelance, and every time I look at one of my articles, it looks different, which is wonderful because you can see that they're constantly playing around, and they're very much have their finger on the pulse as to what is happening with Google, and they're trying to stay a step ahead. So we pulled this down as an example because this is a really clean, great way to show that updating your templates doesn't have to be anything that's potentially super overwhelming. It's really about creating an experience that provides value to the user and is easy for both the user or the reader or the searcher and Google to find. So if you look at the top half of this article from Insurify with this, this really, Pulitzer Prize winning content I wrote about asbestos removal, what they've done here, it's pretty simple. There's a visual, there's a clear headline that relates to this year. There is a subhead, which in some circles used to be called a featured snippet. So if you don't read anything beyond that, you have a question in the headline and you have an answer to it. Is asbestos removal covered by insurance? Home insurance doesn't typically cover asbestos issues, so you'll likely need to pay out of pocket. So if you don't want to know anything else or don't need to know anything else, you can exit out, or if you want to learn more, you can keep on reading. But what they're also doing, and I know some of the folks on this call are starting to do this or are already doing this on your article templates, is it's got elements for EEAT. So it's got the author's name, the editor's name, and while we're not showing it here, if you hover over those two names, you are able to see mini bios as well as logos for other financial and consumer finance publications that the editor and writer write for. All of those things not only lend to the expertise and authority that Insurify is trying to project to the user, the end reader, but Google also picks up on these things. So by setting up a template for your articles that is front loading essentially really relevant, helpful content, that is going to provide the experience that our friend John from Google was talking about how the way the content being presented is in fact what helps make it a, no pun intended, helpful experience. With that, you have a better chance, and I'm saying that very top level. There's more ways. There's ways to say it from a more technical SEO standpoint, but the theory is if you are presenting the content in a helpful manner, in a way that's simple, Google is more likely to pick it up, and then you could appear, hopefully, in the AI overview or in one of those 50 plus spots that are now popping up in the SERP. What I wanted to be to talk about too on this slide, while we're seeing this right now in an editorial content space, this is going to have legs, as I was mentioning earlier, that are going to touch every portion of a website eventually, from your homepage to product pages and other kinds of like marketing pages that have H1s and H2s and H3s and different hierarchies of content and visuals and infographics, all the way down to product description pages. If you have a service and have pages for those, case studies, all those things. Right now, it's too early to see how that's going to shake out and perform in this new SERP environment. But we're going to keep an eye on it and watch how it follows with content taking the lead right now. We just wanted to bring that up because if you are in the middle of reworking other portions of your site or doing a site refresh in the coming months, these are things you're going to want to keep in the back of your mind. Always thinking with the eye of, is this content helpful, and am I presenting it in a way that's demonstrating that it is in fact helpful content? And as you're doing that, whether it's an article or a marketing landing page, for example, think about these things on this little checklist. These are directly from Google. So it's, does it satisfy user curiosity? Does it provide value? Is it creative and original and not curated from somewhere else? And if it's checking any of the boxes on the unhelpful content list, then it might be time to rethink how to reframe the content or rejig a page so that it's presenting more in this helpful content manner. So if you're regurgitating information that already exists, or leaving different gaps for the user to fill in where they have to connect dots, or if it has no point of view or unique angle, Google and the user are not going to see that as helpful content. Emily, did I miss anything? I know this is a lot of information.
No, I think you touched on all the points.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions on this? And you can feel free to add any questions to the chat as well, and we'll tackle them at the end.
At the risk of being this annoying question asker all the time, I did have a question. As you're going through it, a lot of articles out there have this sort of question-oriented title, and then they tend to answer the question, but they bury the lead. They put it way down below because either they're selling ads and they want you to experience those, or they just want you to engage more with them and have more time on page. Is this update going to reduce that or de-incentivize that sort of behavior?
The only way I can see that it would reduce that kind of behavior is that one of the main reasons Google came out with AI overviews, quite frankly, is because sometimes what can happen is the experience on particular web pages can feel really busy and frantic, especially with sticky ads and with pop-ups and gated content. So if Google can reduce that friction for somebody to find an answer to their question or a solution to their problem, you can bet that they're going to do it. So in that sense, I can see that practice being reduced if Google is no longer surfacing content that provides kind of that more frantic experience.
I think those are great words to keep in mind, reducing friction and, that frantic chaotic environment. As we're thinking about how to present content, whether it's editorial or marketing content within a website, always having that in the back of your mind, is this chaotic? Does this make it harder for both the user and Google to surface that answer? And this algorithm is just going to get smarter, especially as brands get smarter with how they're trying to get their different types of content to be surfaced through Google. So it's going to be a lot of I would imagine testing different things to see what's working.
Yeah. And on that note, that's actually a good transition, Sarah. Thanks. So I know, right? So on that note, it's interesting because, obviously the helpful content update was launched and has had many iterations way before AI overviews dropped. And because the importance on the formatting of content, as John Mueller's quote stated, was so emphasized on how the content is presented and formatted, we're actually starting to see kind of that same idea, that same process applied to the very search results. So here, enter the age of the answer engine. So I mentioned on a previous slide that Google wants to be a destination. They don't want to be a vehicle to a destination, AKA your website. This is one of the ways that they're trying to accomplish that. So as we can see here, I typed into Google, what is a personal loan? I did receive an AI overview, or I guess I should say an AI overview was triggered for this particular question. So first I get my quick answer. I'm then met by some of the source links. So we can see Investopedia, Bankrate, Discover. So what that tells me is that this AI overview content was generated based on information found in those articles. I can then click show more and I see this wealth of knowledge. It's marked up with bullet points. It's even, the titles are even bolded in some occurrences. And then if you click even more, you'll get more source links, which is great. Now, something else to keep in mind, of course, as Sarah mentioned, this tool is still very experimental. But it's interesting because for the your money, your life type queries, they do have the caveat of financial advice, consult a professional. So they're even kind of covering their butts on that front as well.
Yeah.
But something to keep in mind too is that the launch of this AI tool, this was really Google's kind of knee-jerk response to tools like ChatGPT, and then other AI tools like Perplexity. Google saw really the early adoption of those and people were super excited about it. And so Google didn't want to get left in the dust. And so they kind of, really were quick and frantic to produce this. So
There's
you
that
will,
word again.
yeah, I know. Yeah, there was like an ex-Google employee that had come out and published, I think it was an article, and they were basically saying that the efforts towards this AI product was fueled by panic and not necessarily user first. So we can see some of that if you play around with this tool. It still falls into the pitfalls of many AI tools like ChatGPT, where it can still hallucinate, or regurgitate, or not regurgitate. It'll come up with facts that aren't facts. What was that phrase? False, or I can't think of it right now. Yeah, so it's still very much in its infancy, but you can see here way more opportunities to actually appear in search, which is exciting. All right. Yes, okay. So what does all of that mean for the future of search? It's really hard to say. And as an SEO of 10 years, I will say it depends. That is a real answer for SEOs. Google's in a super tricky position right now. So on one hand, they want to give users the best possible experience by providing quick, accurate answers to their questions. But on the other hand, they can't just cut out all of the publishers and advertisers who actually create that content that makes the internet what it is. So there are a few scenarios that could potentially play out with AI overviews themselves. One, Google's AI overviews are just going to be a novelty, right? They're significant at first, and then they have a short shelf life. So we kind of sort of saw that with ChatGPT, where a lot of people were super pumped about it at first. And then, as far as using it as a search engine, it kind of trickled off a little bit. So, again, initially, unsuspecting searchers, they might get a kick out of it. It is fun to use. It's interesting to see. But while generative AI has gone mainstream over the past 18 months, many people have not directly interacted with AI tech. And so we can see that actually on Google Trends, turn off Google AI overview is a trending term right now, which is interesting. So, they may find this novelty really cool at first. Maybe they'll show their friends. But after that initial kind of rosy hue wears off, people might develop AI blindness and just scroll right past it. I know I've done that with featured snippets, and this kind of reminds me of that a little bit, although they are way different. Number two, AI overview quality just isn't there yet. It's not good enough. The SERP, this particular SERP feature is not polished. It can't combat against, like I spoke about briefly earlier, major limitations like hallucinations, and then sourcing answers from unreliable content like Reddit. I myself do like to reference Reddit sometimes, but for content that falls within that your money, your life category, you might reference a forum for some like-minded individuals to find common ground with, but you likely aren't going to turn to that for legitimate guidance on important medical or financial decisions. And then number three, also, if you're interested, there is a flood of really, really funny examples of Google's AI overviews just being completely wrong. One of them was something about which presidents went to university, and it had Andrew Jackson graduating in 2005. So 10 out of 10 recommend going to X and looking at some of those examples. And then the third scenario here is that AI overviews continue to improve, which they will. So in this scenario, users are going to love it and they're going to prefer it to traditional search. They'd rather get direct answers or summaries rather than pogo sticking between websites. Specifically, that means clicking into a website, back to the search results, back to another website, back to the search results. So this could crush your traffic, right? It depends. Again, assessing engagement with AI overviews, or assuming that engagement with AI overviews increases, this means that longer queries are actually going to reveal a lot more about what users want, aka their intent. So this is also very similar to how social networks measure behavior. As a result, AI overviews, they may shrink organic traffic over time. And even with the introduction of the zero-click SERP, we've actually seen that diminish over time for years. So, but bring more organic traffic, even though the organic traffic may shrink, it will bring more organic conversions. In other words, more qualified traffic to your site. So, more juice, less squeeze. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Well, let me get there. So did I skip a slide?
I think, yeah, you had a couple of notes on the everything is fine slide.
Oh, did I? Oh, I did. You're right. Thanks, Sarah.
There's so much in this. It's
There's
just
so much.
There's a
Thanks,
lot.
everyone, for your time. I know. Yeah, so this is really just meant to communicate the fact that we completely understand, I myself completely understand that all of the news that's coming out, the ever-changing search marketing landscape, it can very much feel like a dumpster fire of information. So really what we're trying to do here is just kind of parse out the most important things that you need to know. And then as more information comes out, we can kind of prune some of the early predictions and findings and make room for the new and improved ones. Because the data on this is very limited.
And Emily, I know we were talking earlier that we're starting to see which categories it's showing up in.
Yes. Yeah. So there are a couple articles right now that have super early findings about which queries trigger AI overviews based on industry. As it stands right now, the most impacted are beauty and surprisingly healthcare. Finance is on the way lower end of that, which is not really a huge surprise. Sarah and I actually had to work really hard to trigger an AI overview on our phones for some of those personal finance queries. So yes, it is still limited. They're still working out the kinks. Don't expect to see it all the time, but when you do see it, maybe make note of it. If that's a query that you're targeting, it might be time to consider how you're ranking for that query.
Yeah. And we're seeing, like we were able to get something to trigger on the phone, but not to trigger on the desktop. Or we were both using Chrome and I got something to pop, but Emily couldn't. So it was really interesting to see how much of a bit of a dumpster fire it is right now.
It is.
And that at this moment in time, there's not necessarily anything specific that needs to be done other than watching, waiting, and implementing some of these elements like the visuals and waiting to see what Google continues to let us know that they're looking for.
Right. And one of the best sources you can go to figure out what Google values for a particular keyword is Google. If we go to the SERP for a specific keyword and we see that there are videos, images, people also ask questions, that's a pretty good gauge about how Google understands users want to digest the information that they're seeking. So with that, we recognize, obviously we saw that there's tons of changes going on with the SERP. In the video, specifically the screen recording of the AI overview SERP result, you probably noticed that there are a ton more opportunities to actually be featured, aside from just the 10 blue links, which quite frankly have been just SEO optimized to death. So I welcome that part of this kind of SERP evolution, but definitely keeping these kind of 4 components in mind when moving forward can help set you up for success. So number 1, hopefully it goes without saying, but creating a more engaging website. So wanting to find ways to implement some of these Google style improvements. So again, how is your content organized? How is it served to users? Using visuals, more types of formatting, adding more opportunities to click, whether that's internal links, jump links like with a table of contents or calls to action, and then longer pages. So detail, depth, personal examples, and then stories. Also consider working on your headline. So improving click-through rate to your page by writing a title tag with a headline that taps in actually into the psychology of the potential visitor. There are 3 ways a headline can do this. The benefits look high, the costs seem low, and then it's unexpected, right? It uses some language that kind of catches your eye in the sea of similar language that we see on SERPs. So pro tip here, sometimes it might be interesting to consult with your social media or email teams. These guys are pros at triggering psychology that triggers clicks. So if you happen to publish an article and your social or email team are promoting it via social or email, it might be worth consulting with them to see, hey, what did you make the email line, what is that called? Not the email.
Oh, the headline, the
There
subject line, the subject line.
There it is. Thanks, Sarah. What's the subject line of your email? Or you go to social and you try to look at what type of calls to action or text were used in that. It can be helpful to see the differences to try to make your content stand out, again, in the sea of similar language that we see in SERP results for a lot of different types of keywords. The big one and the one that I get the most groans about is diversifying your content media. So this means really keeping in mind that people digest information in a lot of different ways. And again, we see that in what Google is returning in search results: infographics, charts and tables, photos, videos. And this doesn't mean that you have to create a video that's a standalone, right? It can be a complementary source or feature to an existing article. And then this one's really interesting. So targeting website intent queries over fact intent queries. So as we see, you can bet that if Google can provide a factual answer to a query in their search result, they're going to. Focus first on phrases that visitors search for when they're looking to get long form detailed answers, or commercial intent phrases where visitors are considering options for help. So this is an example from a client that I work with. They were ranking for the keyword, what is an installment loan? So we can see that it's driving a lot of impressions, right? It's the result is being seen, but it has no clicks and it has no click-through rate. So when you dig a little bit deeper into what's actually ranking for that term, you can see there's literally no reason to click. The user is getting everything that they need within the SERP. So based on that information, I wouldn't necessarily rely on this query as a reliable source of traffic going forward.
So I know we only have 10 minutes
Oh
left.
yeah, 10 minutes left.
There's so much. We're always here to answer questions. And Todd, we haven't even mentioned this to you yet, but Emily and I were even thinking this might be something that's worth doing quarterly as we continue to learn more about Google, so that we can continue to be a resource for our clients and others, just to sort of summarize what's happening. But in short, we've come up with these, and again, everything has a caveat right now with what's happening. These are the key takeaways for now. For where we're at today on May 23rd, 2024, after the update.
Yeah.
So Emily, go ahead.
Google still loves brands. Focus on establishing your brand as an entity that can be easily recognizable to search engines. So in other words, how does Google view your brand as an ecosystem? Take up space. Like I said, there's way more real estate on the SERP than ever before. Take advantage of the opportunities to serve users in a variety of formats on a single SERP. Quality over quantity, always. Write high quality and helpful content, which is informed by your audiences, informed by what your audiences are searching for information. Focus on the value you bring and use this to make your content unique. So one thing I want to say about this, try to focus on providing firsthand experience. When Sarah was mentioning EEAT, Google recently added that new E to it, and that specifically is experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. When we say experience, Google does not mean you have 10 years in the industry. They mean, do you have firsthand personal experience with the topic or the situation that you're writing about? And then user intent over keywords. Focus on the goal or objective that a user has when they type a query into search engine. So also to keep in mind that the way search is going now, we're seeing it lean much heavily towards prompts and away from keywords, which I know is a big one. And I probably should have added "this is fine" meme after that slide, but
again, we should put it in between all slides.
Yeah, it's super exciting though.
So that's where we're at today for now. And I guess we'll open it up to Q&A in the last 10 minutes that we have. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, comments, derogatory remarks about what's happening, we're here.
We're here to commiserate too, trust me.
Yes.
And if not, that's okay. Who do I? Oh, Striker's in here. Hi, Striker. Who else do I know is in here? Amber. Hi, Amber. Yeah, I know it's a ton of information to digest. We do plan to send out this deck, right? So that people kind of have access to all this info. Yeah.
Yeah. And recording. I do have a couple of questions if nobody else does. You mentioned earlier that NerdWallet took a big hit in this round, and I'm curious as to, I always sort of saw NerdWallet as, having done a really excellent job at putting out quality content that really helps people with their finances. They notoriously have all in-house writers, and they're all very, very good at that. I'm wondering why why you think they took a big hit.
Yeah, I didn't dig into that specific case, but my hunch is that they were publishing too much content that tried to only satisfy a single keyword rather than writing about topics.
I see.
And so instead of somebody having to click on 4 different blog posts to answer a question about credit utilization, they can find all of that information in one article because the writer was able to kind of predict what their next question might be. So that's my suspicion.
Okay. Quick follow-up question, and actually not really a separate question. You mentioned with EAT that the extra E, the experience that Google's looking for personal experience as it pertains to the topic being covered, and I'm wondering how Google susses that out.
Yep.
Is it the way that the writer is referring to their specific experiences in the article?
It can certainly be that. So using language, maybe there's a call out bubble that's like in my personal experience, or when I did this, when I did that.
Yeah.
That is certainly a way that Google can determine that. But also, a lot of the times with those big brands like NerdWallet, and then in the Insurify example we saw, you do see that there's a real person there, and then sometimes you'll be able to follow, or I guess I should say, Google's able to follow links to that individual's social media profiles. And so sometimes on those, there might be something personal shared. But I do think what it comes down to is the language used. So first person, this is my experience. Yeah.
So what I've been seeing for that, just for a couple of examples, Insurify has started adding editor's take, and what they've done is, it's not the editor that edited the article. They have an editor's take from Evelyn, who is the editorial director of Insurify, who has 20 years or so experience in the consumer finance space, and she gives a personalized take on the topic. You might also see it a little bit, I'm not sure how it's quite pulling into Google, but I'm seeing a lot more articles including quotes from people that have experienced something, or like I was just asked by a writer I know, if I wanted to be a source on an article she was writing for the Wall Street Journal about umbrella insurance. So I carry an umbrella insurance policy. She was looking for people who have umbrella insurance to talk about it. So my little quote becomes, part of that article when and if it ever gets published. And then you can also think about it, like if you think about credit cards, I think it's the points guy that's potentially doing this. I can't remember where I saw it, but you might have an article covering the latest, greatest, rewards points for Chase or whatever. And the writer, Ben Luthi, for example, writes a lot about points and travel. We'll be talking about like, hey, I just did a trip around the world, with this credit card and I use these points. So it's really sharing an experience using the product that is being reviewed, or, there's endless examples, but another one would be how I paid, it's an article about debt consolidation written by someone who got in some hot water with some medical debt on their credit cards, used a debt consolidation loan to consolidate at a lower interest rate. And they're telling that story, like, here's how I did it, as part of the content. So it really can take many different forms. And if you have like a service provider, like let's say you are a plumber, you could talk about, doing like being on the job for something and how to unclog a drain, for example. So if you want to get really simple, you can think about it in terms like that, and then how a really simplified example could potentially apply to your industry, and how you could frame that from a content standpoint.
Yeah. And that's actually one reason why Google started returning discussions and forums. So literally forums from Reddit. It's because people are seeking firsthand experience. They want a community.
Which goes beyond a review. They want real people talking about how they've used or experienced something.
Yep.
So we're at about time, but thank you so much for joining us and learning about what's happening in this crazy space.
It's ever changing, ever evolving. Don't get bogged down by the hundreds of articles that are coming out daily at this point. As far as, the new Google AI overviews go, I would encourage you to seek potentially a Slack channel, or follow some individuals on Twitter, I'm sorry, X, that can be a really great way to get kind of the highlights, if you will, of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Or sign up for a newsletter from one of the authoritative SEO journals like Search Engine Journal. They post daily on LinkedIn some highlights, but you can also sign up for a daily or weekly newsletter. Even SEMrush and some of the bigger platforms that are in this space also have great newsletters that you can subscribe to. Although it can become a little overwhelming when you start to read stuff. I ping Emily things every day. I'm like, what is this? What does this mean? She's like, wait. So
It's okay, I promise.
limit how much you're consuming, because there is
Yeah.
quite a lot. And there's definitely some content out there about what's happening, sort of designed to be kind of clickbaity and a little scare tactic-y. So it's really important to go with like a neutral source like Search Engine Journal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every now and then we'll put something in our newsletter that we send out every other week as well. Thank you guys for joining. Again, we are Pinwheel, and we'll see you again.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you.
We lost Melissa. Is she there?
Might have had to run to another meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she mentioned something in Slack that she had to do, like, go somewhere, do something.
Oh. All right. I am gonna hop too, but I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, bye.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Cheers.